Good afternoon to you. Mark Sutton with HurricaneTrack.com here with your off-season edition of the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion. It's Monday, the 22nd day of February 2021, and as the graphic shows, we are now less than 100 days away from the start of the Atlantic hurricane season. So that being said, we'll take a look at the names that we're going to be using for this year. How many of them? We'll have to wait and see. And a few other things that we normally look at in the off-season weekly update. Sea surface temperature anomalies, the Southern Oscillation Index, the state of the ENSO, that kind of stuff. And then we'll move on to lower 48 weather, which this week, thankfully, is a lot more quiet and less impactful than what we were dealing with 1 week ago today. So here we are, less than 100 days to go until the 2021 hurricane season. I hope you're ready. It looks like it could be busy, and I'll give you a little teaser as to what I mean by that at the end here, so stick around. All right. So 2021 Atlantic storm names, we only use 21 letters of the alphabet, and we omit Q, U, X, Y, Z, mainly because there's just not that many unique names that we can add to the list. There are 6 lists that get recycled, and if there's a notable storm or hurricane like Katrina or Andrew, they get retired and replaced with another name that, like Katrina got replaced by Katia, I do believe. Is that right? And that's how that works. Like Laura will probably almost certainly be retired. Dorian will certainly be retired. They haven't been able to meet, and this helps me to segue into who chooses these names. They being the National Hurricane Center representatives and the World Meteorological Organization folks, part of the UN. They get together, they decide on these names. Typically, they want these names to represent as many nationalities of the Atlantic Basin as possible. That's why you'll see, in some years, more difficult names to pronounce than others, like last year with Isaias. And it just depends on the year and what the name makeup is. This year we begin with Anna, and we end with Wanda. So there you go, and Elsa is in there. No, these people aren't necessarily fans of the hit mega-billion-dollar franchise of Frozen. I don't know. But hey, Danny's in there, and that's a typical American name, right? Bill, Anna, Ida. Ida, I don't know what nationality that would be. Henri with an I, so it's not Henry. It's Henri with an I, the H is silent. Mindy, Nicholas, just to go through some of these. Rose, Sam, Teresa, Victor, and like I said, Wanda. How many will we use? Hard to say. Last year, of course, we used all 21 of the list names. They were all used up. And then we went into the Greek alphabet, and I guess what we used 9 of those because we ended up with 30 name storms. So that's the list of names. Get to know them. I suspect we will use at least 15. That's a good guess this early on. 15 of these names will get used up, in my opinion. We'll see. So there you go. And this is on our Facebook page. If you want to memorize them, you have nothing else to do. Why not? All right, so moving on to some geography and some ENSO stuff, El Nino Southern Oscillation. When we think ahead to the hurricane season, those of us that really watch this stuff closely, trying to get a bead on what might happen, where will the busy parts of the season unfold? Will it be in the Pacific? Will it be the West Pacific, the East Pacific, Central? I don't know. That's what we try to figure out. Is it going to be the Atlantic Basin? And the biggest driver that we've seen in determining the quantity of storms, and to some extent the quality of them, how strong they are, is what we call the El Nino Southern Oscillation, the ENSO. And these are those ENSO regions. And I talk about this every once in a while, so I thought I'd bring up these various regions and just kind of show you. This is the Nino 1-2 area right off the coast of South America. Not much impact on Atlantic hurricane activity. And then you've got the big Nino 3 area that extends out here, the Nino 4 from there, and then overlapping like a Venn diagram is the Nino 3.4, kind of encompassing the two Nino regions of 3 and 4. What does all this mean? Well, basically, when this area through here is abnormally warm, you get a lot of rising motion in the atmosphere. I'll try to draw some rising arrows there. And that promotes hurricanes and all kinds of activity all throughout the Pacific. Very busy. So the air rises there, sinks over the Caribbean and the eastern tropical Atlantic. Doesn't really affect the Gulf of Mexico too much. But the warm water in the Pacific typically, when it's abnormally warm, has a negative impact on the Atlantic basin over here. So we can just put an X and say usually during an El Nino year, this is positive, this is negative. So plus here, X there, or whatever you want to call it, plus and minus. I guess I could have done that, but that's what we talk about when we talk about these ENSO regions. And as it stands, if this area through here is cooler than average, especially in the central Pacific here, the 3.4 area, that's a La Nina. And that is very favorable for hurricanes to develop in the Atlantic. And that's exactly what we've got, right? So there's the region there. That's part of the Nino 3 region, and then the 4 regions over here. So a good chunk of the Nino 3.4 area is in this La Nina state. We know that, right? I know we know that, but I'm just kind of refreshing you on this. And then in the eastern Pacific, as of late, things have kind of warmed up a little bit. Maybe a relaxation of the trade winds down here so that water temperatures can warm. They're not as stirred up. We had a little bit of a degradation of Atlantic sea surface temperatures anomalies in the far eastern Atlantic. It's not quite as pronounced over here, but we did have a strong Saharan air layer outbreak recently and maybe a little burst of trade winds. All in all, the modeling is suggesting the Atlantic will be very warm. We'll put a big positive in here, plus, and the Pacific over here is going to stay cooler than average, so we'll put a minus, and that should give us a busy hurricane season once again. Related to that, and back to the map over here, the SOI, which is a way to look at the pressures here between Tahiti, never been to Tahiti, I bet it's beautiful over there, and Darwin, never been there either, but these pressure differences, this relationship, that's the Southern Oscillation Index. And as I point out often, when it is strongly positive and consistently so, like we've seen going back months and months, this is November, December, January, it's all positive, that drives that La Nina pattern because the pressures are generally lower in this pattern, lower over here than they are over here. So the net flow of air is typically stronger from east to west. The air on this planet flows from high pressure to low pressure. Pretty sure it does everywhere else too, but we know that on the Earth, and that's what this positive SOI shows us. It's that generally speaking, the pressures in Darwin are going to be lower than they are in Tahiti. And here you go. There, I can prove it. 1,003 millibars today in Darwin, 1012 in Tahiti. 1,003, look at this, just consistently 1,007, 1,006, 1,005, whatever. 1013, 1012, 1011, 1015. There you go. Lower to the west in Darwin than it is to the east in Tahiti. So voila, the net flow of air is strong this way, or strong enough that it keeps this cool pattern in place. That being said, looking out ahead, and just looking back at this, it's been fairly consistently positive, that SOI, so that gets figured into the climate models, like from the Climate Prediction Center, the International Research Institute, from Columbia University. We get these nice bar graphs. What do we see? Well, we're in La Nina now, so 100% chance as we go into the next several months, the La Nina fades, but then starts to try to make a little bit of a comeback there. But more importantly, in my opinion, is not necessarily the La Nina, but the absolutely ridiculously low probabilities here of El Nino, just barely cracking 10% by September, October, November, and that is actually after the peak of the hurricane season. For the peak of the season, this is our most important tri-monthly area right here, ASO, August, September, October, maybe a 10% shot at El Nino, 50-50 just under for La Nina, so cool neutral, no El Nino. I think we will have a very busy season again, and we're just kind of reinforcing this. We're less than 100 days away now, so we're getting closer to where this kind of stuff is going to start to get into clearer focus. We're going to be able to put more stock into these types of products from the CPC, the Euro, the UK Met, and other products that come out, seasonal forecast products. they're getting better and better. And as I said, I will kind of tease it at the end. I got a treat for you that I'm going to unleash for you on Wednesday. I'll talk about that at the end. All right? All right. Some of you already know, but we'll get to it in a minute. Anyway, so actual sea surface temperatures, just a couple things to look at here that I think are interesting. First, you bet the very, very cold outbreak brought much colder than we would expect to see water temperatures for the Northwest Gulf. Typically, these waters are shallower. We know that because of the risk of storm surge, and so they react very quickly to changes in the atmosphere, and in this case, obviously, the air temperatures. So some of these areas here, 12 and even 11 to 10 degrees Celsius, getting down towards 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Conversely, in the middle of the Gulf over here, this has stayed very strong and steadfast. This loop current coming up, 26 Celsius over here. So we're talking about water temperatures that are about 80 degrees Fahrenheit, or 26 or so Celsius here, and 50 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 10 Celsius over here. Wow, what a contrast between the two. Pretty remarkable what that air mass did. But you know what? We're almost to March. The sun angle in the sky, for those of us that get to see the sun, it seems to have just been raining forever around my area. We'll get to that. But, the incoming solar radiation, the sun angle is getting higher. The time for the Gulf to cool off is over, pretty much. We're going to see it gradually warm up, and we will compare and contrast images like this. I'm going to save this one, and we'll compare it to next week. And especially in the Eastern Gulf, watch. You're going to see, we're getting towards the time when the sea surface temperatures begin to increase. Spring break is coming up for some folks, if we get to have it this year, hopefully, in March and April. At least in the Eastern Gulf, I think we're going to get a nice rebound in these water temperatures, and it'll hopefully be pretty nice out there. In the Atlantic, or on the Atlantic side of things, in the mid-Atlantic states, water temperatures, cold, absolutely, 2, 3, 4, 5 Celsius, 6, 7, 8, depending on how far south you go. And then the Gulf Stream over here, as I pointed out before, the gradient, the difference between the Gulf Stream right here and these cold North Atlantic waters is not that much, relatively speaking. And so we don't see this very thick area of isotherms in here. Some years we've seen them like right here. It's very, very, there's a sharp gradient right off of the outer banks. Some of this cold longshore current has worked its way south, butting up against the wall of the Gulf Stream there, the western wall. So we're talking about temperatures in the low 70s here and upper 40s to 50s here. I mean, yikes. And that's over a short distance. Farther to the north, that gradient is much less. So you still have 60s and 70s in the water temperatures here Fahrenheit, and then in some cases 40s and 50s Fahrenheit up here, but it's not as steep a gradient. And we can look back at the anomalies map, going back to that real quick. There's your reason. Look at that. Very, very warm water temperature anomalies compared to average, off the chart. 5, 6 degrees Celsius in the Gulf of Maine, south of the Canadian Maritimes. Wow. And the entire Atlantic Basin generally running above the long-term average. And all of this is really going to start to come home and matter more and more the closer we get to the start of the season. But as a note, just to remind you, because I don't want to ever make too much out of something unnecessarily, the Gulf always going to be warm enough for hurricanes. The biggest thing that I look for with these anomalies in the Gulf, upcoming severe weather season, energy from the Gulf fueling that, and the potential, if it is warmer earlier, yes, maybe we would see some early development before June 1st. We'll just have to wait and see. But it's not like the Gulf won't be ready for intense hurricanes. It always is. You always have to be prepared there. Everywhere, of course, but it'll be warm enough, believe me. All right, so let's get out of the tropics and move to lower 48 weather. Wow, what a difference a week makes. All that Arctic air, starting to modify. Very little in the way of watches and warnings compared to what we saw. There is some winter weather in the northwestern part of the country coming into Washington and Oregon through the Intermountain West of Idaho and Montana. Some wind warnings, so forth and so on. Even some blizzard warnings in far west, northwest Montana. Over here, these are severe thunderstorm warnings in parts of the Tidewater and the Mid-Atlantic states, some winter weather advisories. But this is your garden variety. You know, people can handle this kind of thing. Not too terribly bad weather, right? It's just we saw how bad it can get last week. This we can handle. If we look at it from a satellite perspective, a couple things to point out to you. First of all, snowpack all through here, eroding away. Most of it's gone out of Texas, thank goodness. That's White Sands, New Mexico. This is snowpack in the mountains. Oh, look at all that snow up in the Rockies, down through the Sierra, the Wasatch Range. Wow, this is great. You want to see that. You got to have that fresh water locked up in the way of snowpack so that as it melts off in the spring, as long as it doesn't do it quickly, it gives you a nice trickle of water, fresh water, going into the summer months. And that is very important. It really is. Sometimes bad weather can bring good things. And when we saw those storm systems earlier in the winter, pounding the west, that drops snow that will bring you the water source that you need when the weather warms. South into the tropics down here, you can see the trades blowing through the Caribbean. Not much in the way of convective activity as you would imagine right now, just nothing to really get that going. We don't have any tropical waves that I know of at the moment. If there are, they are very weak. So the trades moving on through, no big deal. A little bit of a frontal boundary right here. Colder, drier, stable air to the north. You can tell by the low cloud cover that you see there. And then a front coming through the Carolinas and the Tidewater, as I mentioned, Mid-Atlantic states, bringing some severe weather, severe thunderstorm warning or two in effect for parts of this area. We can zoom in and see this line coming in towards a good deal of eastern North Carolina up through Virginia Beach and vicinity, then the offshore waters of the northeast states, and then finally the colder air up here, a little bit of frozen precip. But nothing too terrible, nothing that we can't deal with. And, the frigid air is starting to abate, which is good. We're getting towards March. Finally, the change of seasons will be upon us. And speaking of that, severe weather, a little bit of a risk of it today, as is happening now. Marginal conditions in eastern North Carolina. The day 2 outlook, maybe some widely scattered storms over here in the Pacific Northwest. Day 3, look at that, near the Four Corners area. We're getting closer. Once we get to March, we're going to start focusing on severe weather more, that these maps will start to become more interesting to us, and we'll focus on severe weather, the Deep South, Tornado Alley, the traditional area of Tornado Alley, Florida. We'll start looking at that closer and closer. It's coming. We're less than a week away now from the start of March and severe weather season, and then we're even closer at that point. We will be within 90 days of hurricane season. Yeah, all right, so I talked about it, teased it, so what is it? On Wednesday, I'm going to make public a video that I put together yesterday, or the day before yesterday, I can't even remember. I think it was the day before yesterday, Saturday, sorry. Days are running together. But the bottom line is I got a real nice video for you, part of our Hurricane U series, U for university, like a little educational session, if you will, with an expert out there. In this case, it's Ben Knoll. I have already put it on Patreon as part of our crowdfunding perks. If you support what we're doing on Patreon, you get early access to some of this stuff, most of it in this case. And in this case, certainly with Ben Knoll's interview that I did, we talked about the upcoming hurricane season with all these nice graphics and from the NMME and the Euro, and kind of the, as he says, pulling the curtain back and looking at how the mechanics of these things work. Great session. I don't call it an interview. It's just more him and I talking. It's like a video podcast. Hurricane U, that's what I call it. I will make that publicly available on the YouTube channel Wednesday morning. So if you're not subscribed to my YouTube channel, now's a good opportunity to do so and hit that bell to be notified, ding, 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 right, that HurricaneTrack has put out a new video. Or you can join up on Patreon. Why not? It helps to fund what we do. And you get access to all kinds of stuff, including that tracking map right there. This is from our HurricaneTrack Insider site. This is a kind of a multi-use tracking map, but that's what you get as part of your crowdfunding support through Patreon. The link to do that is in the description of this video. As they say, like and share, if you will. It helps the algorithms and all that on the old YouTube matrix, whatever, to make the videos more popular, I guess. At least that's what I hear the YouTubers say. And I guess it does make a difference. And you know what? You watching does make a difference. I appreciate it very, very much. Let me come back on here to sign off. I like to talk to you and not just at you. But we've gotten through a good deal of the winter time already. We're less than 100 days away from the season. And once we get into March, we're going to start doing more. We're going to have more updates, more things going on, more projects coming up. And it is very good and exciting to always have you as a part of it. So absolutely, if you want to follow along, subscribe on the YouTube channel. I'm on Twitter at HurricaneTrack. Facebook is HurricaneTrack as well. That logo down there, the winter logo that one of our good friends Tim produced for us, eventually will look more spring-like once we get to March. And then, of course, when we get to May, we switch it over to that logo right there. It's coming. I hope everybody's going to be ready. We'll help you do so to the best of our ability here. All right? All right. Have a great rest of your week. And yes, as always, thanks for tuning in from whatever device you happen to be doing so from. I very much appreciate your time and attention. I am Mark Setta for HurricaneTrack.com and the HurricaneTrack brand. We'll do it all again next Monday.